So, our first storyteller, I'm pleased to introduce Davis Frank. He is the Associate Director of the San Francisco office of Pivotal Labs, and he's in charge of their open source, official open source efforts. And I'm super glad he agreed to be here today. Ladies and gentlemen, Davis Frank.
All right, is mine there? Is that good? Thanks, Sarah. If Sarah ever sends you an email on a Tuesday and says, could you tell a story on Saturday, just say yes. So thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here. She said, tell me a story or tell you guys a story, and I said, great, no problem. I even have a Ruby one, since this is a RubyConf. And I want to tell you a little bit about my career. I spent a good chunk of, at the moment, which is the middle of my career, in management. And I got there because I did a whole bunch of crazy software. I'm sure I've told some of you those stories before. And then I realized that I wasn't as thrilled about writing the code as much as I used to be. It was hard. Shipping was hard. And so I did what many people do, and you go into management. Those who can't code, manage. And that lasted for a while, a couple of different jobs. And then one day, in 2006, I kind of had it with my employment situation, and I quit. I still had hair then. And then I was faced with, well, okay, I'm a software manager now, right? So now I've got to go find another management job. And I tried that, had a couple of really lousy interviews. The last of which was, I had what is closest to an out-of-body experience I'd ever had, which was somebody saying, or looking down and hearing my voice in some jackass saying things that I never thought I would say. So I withdrew from that, stopped the job search, and said I'm going to take some months off. And I did. But then, of course, I had no idea what to do next. But I'd been doing management. I had been interested in software process for a long time. So I sat there contemplating what was going to be next, and decided that I reached back into 2002, which I got to meet Kent Beck right about the time he was doing the book tour for the Extreme Programming White Book, and not only enjoyed that talk, but also got to spend some time with him and some of my coworkers and a couple of other people down at the Nut House in Palo Alto. There we go. I did not drink MGD that night. But I did talk to Kent for a while and got really inspired about what he gave us, which is essentially a set of new first principles. Like the things that we had been, and the processes we'd been using for a long time, he kind of invalidated and said, okay, let's go back a little bit. Let's find even better first principles and sort of iterate forward again. And that's what XP was sort of all about. And so I said, okay, I've got dedicated time. I don't know what to do. I'm going to find something technical to do. And a friend of mine named Dave said, hey, you should look at this Ruby on Rails thing. This is summer of 2006. So I bought the books. I went through the Pickaxe book. I went through Agile Development with Rails. Had a really good time. And I looked up one day and realized I was coding again and how much fun it was. And I found out a little bit more about Ruby and said, well, this is why Ruby exists, to make us happy. And suddenly I was happy again. And I was happy and I was coding. And it turns out this was totally unexpected, right? I'd done the management thing. Why would I go back to coding again? But whoops. And I spent a lot of time that summer camped out in a Pete's next to an Apple store, stealing Apple Wi-Fi, and doing crazy things like on Windows, writing up docs that went on the Rails wiki to have you install MySQL the right way so that if you're using Cygwin, you can actually do Rails development in Eclipse on Windows. I don't do that anymore. But I uncovered all this ability, like when I was writing assembly code in the 90s, right after I graduated out of school, I was having a lot of fun. I was having that amount of fun again. It turns out I had it in me. I just got a little distracted and needed a little prodding and some new rules, and really challenged myself again and had a blast. And suddenly, software problems are coming out of the woodwork everywhere for me to write web apps. This is fantastic. Okay, so then revenue called, or bills called, and said we needed some revenue in the house. And so I went back to work, bounced through a startup, wound up at Pivotal Labs where I am now. I'm not the associate director. I am an associate director. There are a bunch of us. But all it means is that I get to help, not just, all right, they don't let me build clients anymore for code. I still do some coding. I'll get to that in a sec. But I help, now get to like at this meta level, I'm helping, and I know because I've talked to you some before earlier today, some of you guys with your projects and teach you some of those same things. often in Ruby. And that's awesome, and we all get happy. And that's what Ruby's about, right? That's why we're here. Now, some other things have happened to me along the way. Tom just used the slide. I'll use it again. JavaScript kind of happened to me. And then I had to say, well, OK, I'm having fun in Ruby. There's this JS thing. I got to work in this now. How do I make things happy for me in JavaScript? Well, we wrote a JavaScript test framework that made us pretend that we were in RSpec. Dirty little secret, which I will share with you here. I hope that this is helping you the way that the community helped me as I made a transition to this language, because that was really part of the point. But those things happen, but that doesn't mean that I've given up on Ruby at all. But it does mean that I've sort of thought about meta of what's happened to me over the last 7 years. And it's like TDD, except for careers. I've sort of test-driven my career along the way, right? It's like, oh, I kind of want to do that. Life looks interesting. Let's do a little bit of that. And is it green? Is it working? Am I happy? Yes. OK, next test. And not to be afraid to throw it all away and start again. I've done it a couple of times now. And it's also kind of fun to flip people off on the way out the door when they really piss you off. But we'll call those red tests. And then we'll get them back green again, because that's what we do, red, green, refactor. And sometimes that means refactoring your whole career. But like I said, I haven't given up on Ruby. I wrote a gem that does this presentation thing with Deck.js. That was kind of cool. I wrote this thing this year called Anchorman, not for any other reason than to help turn Git logs into release notes, because release notes are a pain in the neck. And I'm not doing this to toot my own horn at all, but I'm pointing out to you that if you had told me 10 years ago that as an old 43-year-old fart that I was going to be writing open source projects and people were going to be using them and it was going to be helping the community, I would have told you, no, I'm in management. why would I do that? Young me would be incredulous. So I'm telling you this to think about, when you're thinking about your career, let this affect you the same way and say, OK, well, what do I really want to do next? And push yourself there. And it's not just about the code, and it's not just about interesting problems, or maybe I can flip it around and say, actually, your career is a pretty interesting problem. So why don't you think about your career in the same way that you think about your code, because that worked for me. I do want to say thanks, though. I want to say thanks to my friend Dave, who was the first guy who said, yeah, you should go watch these 37 Signals screencasts. They're kind of cool. I want to thank Kent. I've got a good epilogue for that in a second. Because if Kent hadn't told me that, oh, by the way, waterfall is painful for a reason, I wouldn't have even made it that far. And of course, thanks, Mats, for making it such that when I sat down again and tried to code for the first time for really about 5 or 6 years, that all those object-oriented principles that I had learned that I was doing in C++ Windows code, just kind of came out of my fingers very naturally in this great expressive language that meant that an old guy could code again. That was awesome. But I also wanted to thank all of you guys. Some of you I work with now. Some of you have been clients, like I said. But if it wasn't for the community, I wouldn't have made it to where I was 3 years ago. It's certainly not here, right? We all stand on each other's shoulders, and that's fantastic. And let's not stop that. Not that we would, but it's good to stop every now and again and say it out loud. And so thank you all. I do want to end it with an epilogue. Kent gave a talk at RailsConf 2008. It was the Saturday night talk. It's up on Blip TV. It's a fun thing to watch. He talks about test-driven development coming about and design patterns coming about. It's a good history of software development stuff from the 80s and 90s. But I made sure to go up and talk to him afterwards, because at this point I just started at Pivotal Labs. And he and Rob Mee, who founded Pivotal, are pals. And I wanted to go up and say, hey, my name's Davis. I don't know if you remember me, but there was that night at the Nut House. He goes, I remember you. And I'm like, oh, crap. Wait a minute, though. Were you that forestry student? And I remembered that the other guy that was there with us was kind of unless you're in the crowd right now, in which case I'll get jumped on the way out. This guy who was off in the woods, redwoods somewhere, coding on his own in one of those huts on top of a tree and teaching himself test-driven development. But he was a little nuts. And yeah, Kent's like, that guy was crazy. I don't need to see that guy again. I'm glad you're not him. I said, good. And so we chatted a little bit, and he said, well, what are you doing now? And I said, well, I'm writing Ruby for Rob Mee at Pivotal Labs. He goes, oh, I don't have to worry about you ever again, do I? I said, no, you don't. Test green. Career saved. Anyway, thank you all. That's all I got. Appreciate your help in the community, and thanks for the chance to tell you that story.